Good day, everyone. We are now on the fourth chapter of our course, which is on the nutrition and feeding of dairy animals. So for this chapter, this is being subdivided into five topics, which I will discuss. The first one muna. So we have the digestive system of dairy animals, the different nutrients, the nutrient composition of feedstuffs of the dairy animals, the physiological requirements of these animals, and as well as let's try to have later on some feed formulation. But for this recorded discussion, I will be focusing first on the digestive system of the dairy animals and then the different processes involved. So here in the digestive system of dairy animals, this comprises of the following parts, which falls on the anatomy of their digestive system. So we have the mouth, which comprises with three accessory organs, the teeth, the tongue, and then the salivary glands. And then we have also the pharynx, esophagus, and then there is a famous compound, the stomach, which has four compartments. We have the reticulum, omasum, abomasum, and then the rumen. And then we have also the small and large intestines as well as the rectum and anus. So let's try to give their functions one by one. First, we have the mouth, which states here that it is responsible for the breakdown of food materials and serves as a prehensile or grasping mechanism and as a defensive and offensive weapon. So meaning the mouth is used primarily for holding, for grinding, and of course for mixing the food with saliva, but may also be used to manipulate the environment through grasping of objects and as a defensive and offensive weapon to their predators if there are some. So definitely the mouth is considered to be the beginning of the digestive system. So it says here that it is for prehension, mastication, and insalivation. So pag sinabi natin na prehension, this is usually yung pag-ingest. Okay? Yung pag-ingest or pag-saves in ng feed sa mouth ng animal. So di ba when you observe the ruminant animals, ang ginagamit nila to convey the feed materials ay yung kanilang tongue and then the lower incisors. So mostly, napapansin natin to sa mga cattle. But for the case sa mga sheep, they usually ingest the feed materials through their lips or yung muzzle and even with their teeth. Now, what about for mastication? Pag sinabi natin na mastication, this is simply chewing process or the mechanical breakdown of feed into smaller particles. However, for the ruminants, the mastication itself for coarser feed particles usually occurs during the rumination process or the chewing process, which I will discuss it later on. Then pag insalivation, ito yung once na natapos yung prehension and mastication, dito yung susunod of which yung na-chew na feed material, this will eventually be mixed to saliva. So yun yung insalivation na sinasabi dito. Then of course, it is being used also, the mouth, as a tool in the bolus formation in dairy as well as in ruminant animals. So ano itong bolus na tinatawag dito? So ito yung na-grind or na-chew na food within the mouth mixed with the saliva. Okay? Then as I have said, since the mouth is the start or the beginning of the digestive system, definitely it contains its structures that assist in the digestive process in the body of dairy animals, which include the teeth, the tongue, and then the salivary glands. So let's try to recall first what is the function of the teeth. Also, although this is a basic term na din, very self-explanatory na din, but just to include it in my discussion, let's try to extract what is the function of the teeth among these animals. So yung teeth ang main tool in chewing or yung tinatawag natin na mastication. Okay? So as the food that is being ingested has been chewed, so mastication breaks down the tough connective tissues and fibers coming from the forages na in-ingest ng mga animals na to. And it usually helps saturate these materials with lubricants such as the saliva and then the enzymes which I will discuss as my discussion progresses dito sa mga enzymes na to. So yun yung ginagawa ng ngipin ng animal. Then for the tongue, magka-partner lang to with the teeth. Kasi if sa teeth ay for mastication, for the tongue naman, this for grasping or yung tinatawag kanina na prehensile mechanism. Okay? So for the salivary glands, this usually produces saliva to moisten the food that is being produced, no? Which contains yung tinatawag natin na chemical enzymes. Like yung salivary amylase, salivary maltase, of which etong mga enzymes na to, they are usually the substances na nag-act as catalyst para mapabilis yung digestive process sa katawan ng animals. Second composition of the digestive system is the pharynx. Although this is also a part of the respiratory system, but since this is the common passage of food also, that's why I have it included it here in my discussion. Okay, so the pharynx itself is the common passage for food and air, which is lined with mucous membrane, and it is being surrounded by muscles. So etong mga muscles within the walls of the pharynx are responsible for the orderly directing ng air, ng food, and then ng mga liquids in such a way that the air from the nasal cavity is directed into the larynx and food and liquids are directed into the esophagus. Thus, the path of ng hangin at saka yung mga na-swallowed na feed substances that are being ingested by the animals must cross in the pharynx, of which you can see the relationship of pharynx and mouth to larynx and esophagus during normal respiration in figure A, and then the normal na swallowing process for the figure B. Now with the esophagus, this is a muscular tube extending from the pharynx to the stomach, just caudal to the diaphragm. So ano ang ginagawa dito? As the animal ingests the food, okay? As the animal ingests the food substances into its mouth, and as what I have said a while back, the feed that is being ingested will eventually mixes with the saliva produced by the salivary glands. And then after that, it will be swallowed. So upon swallowing, okay, the feed mixed with saliva will eventually travel down to the esophagus until it reaches the rumen, which is a part of their compound stomach. So the esophagus here is fundamental because of its muscular part. Kasi yung muscular structure nito or the musculo-membranous tube, okay, yung muscular structure na, nito ang nag-create ng waves of muscle contraction. Okay, nagkakaroon ng muscle contraction here para ma-permit yung mga feed na na-ingest ng katawan sa mouth ng animal to be to move down, okay? To move down to the stomach. Okay? So yun yung ginagawa ni esophagus. So basically importante din siya with the rumination process, wherein as the ruminant animal regurgitates the feed from the rumen to the mouth. Okay? For this reason, etong esophagus has the capacity to contract its muscular tubes in both ways. So pwedeng bidirectional movement. So gaya ng sabi ko kanina, from the mouth to the rumen or from the rumen back to the mouth. Kasi yun yung process ng rumination. Okay? So after na makapag-ingest ng food yung animal, and then dadaan siya sa esophagus, and then mapupunta siya sa stomach ng animal, and then after that from the rumen and then the reticulum, babalik ulit siya. Okay, so dadaan ulit na naman yung partially digested na feed particles into the esophagus back to the mouth, and then ulit babalik na naman papunta sa other compartments ng stomach ng animal. Okay, so yun yung rumination process, of which I will discuss it more clearly later on as my discussion progresses. Now we move to the next part of the digestive system of the dairy animals as well as for the ruminant animals, which is the compound stomach. So this muscular digestive organ intends as a site for feed storage, grinding, and mixing of feed, absorption, some enzymatic action, and microbial fermentations. And about for the size for the compartments ng stomach ng mga animals na to, usually for the young na large ruminants or yung mga calf or mga caracal, their stomach can accommodate around 25 to 35 gallons of substances. For the large ruminants naman, it can accommodate around 40 to 60 gallons. And for the small ruminants, they can accommodate 8 gallons. Okay? So basically, the stomach of these animals, as I have said, functions as the storage of the ingested feed. Dito din nagkakaroon ng mechanical breakdown through the aid of the different enzymes within the digestive system. Kasi we all know that the ingested feed materials are not being absorbed by the body of the animal if there is no existence of the enzymes available from it. Okay. Now, since we are talking about the different ruminant animals, so we try to differentiate the different four compartments of their stomach. Okay, beginning with the abomasum, which is commonly known or being called as the true stomach of the ruminant animals. So the abomasum itself ang nagsisecrete for digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid, which are fundamental in the breakdown of feeds prior na ma-reach nito ang intestines. So for this structure, etong abomasum is the most similar compartment when we compare it to the non-ruminant animals. So with the four compartments of this stomach, the abomasum usually accounts 7% of the total size ng stomach ng mga ruminant animals. And as I have previously mentioned from this one, since there is a production of HCl and digestive enzymes, definitely we could expect that with this compartment, it has low pH. Kasi ang HCl naman, it is acid. And alam naman natin na pag low pH, mababa, meaning acidic. Okay? So low pH yung nandito sa abomasum. Now this is fundamental also to digest yung remaining parts of the feeds that are being ingested. So yung mga microbial proteins na na-excrete from the feed, okay, that is broken down, and the amino acids from these proteins will then be absorbed by the animal through the small intestine, which I will discuss it later on. So dito sa abomasum, dito yung pinaka-last portion of the stomach for the feed particles that are being ingested will be completely digested. Okay? So yun yung abomasum. So after the abomasum, mapupunta siya kaagad kay small intestine. Next compartment would be the omasum, which is commonly known as many flies, or it is also termed as the book. Okay? So ang ginagawa dito for this compartment is the omasum itself, it squeezes the semi-digested food and increases the surface area for the bacteria. So since semi-digested yung food particles, it usually acts now as a filter pump, okay, to sort the liquid and fine food particles. So yung mga coarse na fiber particles coming from the feed materials that are being ingested by the animal are not allowed to enter the omasum itself. And also, one of the other important functions pala with the omasum is it can be the site for absorption ng tubig. Okay? Kasi siya nga yung nagiging filter pump. So it is also the site for the absorption of water, pwede ding minerals, and ano pa ba? They can be also the site for the absorption of nitrogen and even electrolytes later on. Okay. Also, the omasum as the third part of the stomach, it usually makes up the 8% of the total size of the stomach of this animal. And its purpose is not exactly known. But since these have strong muscles in its walls, gaya ng sabi ko, it usually grind some certain amount of feed, pero yung kung gaano karami is not yet known. Okay? And before I forget pala, one function din pala niya is it can also squeeze some of the water out of the feed particles. Kaya tinatawag siya na site of absorption of liquid kanina. Kasi nga, ini-squeeze niya yung mga water content from the feed particles that are being digested. Okay? Now we move to the reticulum. About the reticulum, this is the structure of its internal mucosa, which is very easily recognizable as it has called as the honeycomb shape. So in general, one of the functions of the reticulum is it is being responsible in bringing back the food that is being ingested to the mouth to be rechewed. Okay? Also, isa ding ginagawa nito is nagko-collect siya ng mga pre-digest na food particles. Pero yung smaller pieces lang then it will move them to the omasum. Pero pag medyo malalaki yung food particles, then definitely it will move them muna sa rumen to be furtherly digested. Okay? Bago mapunta sa kanya. Then we have the rumen, which is considered to have the largest compartment among all the four, which accounts for nearly 250 liters in volume. And this is also called as the punch or fermentation vat, kung saan nandito yung mga billions of microorganisms that are beneficial for the conversion later on nitong mga feed particles na na-digest. So nandiyan yung mga bacteria at saka mga protozoa. Okay? And pag rumen, merong tatlong process na importante dito. We have the fermentation, mixing, and conversion. So pag sinabi natin na fermentation, usually this is the process wherein the animal, specifically the ruminant animals, convert the feeds that were being ingested into energy sources. So the rumen basically stores the feed that a ruminant animal regurgitates or rechew or and reswallow. Okay? So the feeds ingested, and let us remember na yung mga animals na to chew their cud for a couple of hours, which I will discuss later on yung process ng tinatawag natin na rumination. Then in addition, the rumen is also capable in fermenting these feed materials through the creation of gases. Okay? So ano yung mga gases na to? So we have yung methane, okay? Isa yung methane tsaka yung carbon dioxide. Pero kailangan mai-expel pa din ito sa katawan ng animals, okay? Through belching na tinatawag. Okay? So or eructation. So ito yung paglabas ng gases sa katawan ng animals. Okay? So yun yung fermentation process. Also, the rumen is also responsible in fermenting these feed materials and be converted later on to volatile fatty acids. And if the nutrients are for carbohydrates, and then these are being absorbed into its walls down to the blood, and after this will now be the time that this will be used as energy sources of the animal. Now for the mixing process, this is another fundamental function of the rumen because it permits to mix the feed in the stomach and it helps the animal to regurgitate the cud. Okay? Now for the conversion, ito yung isa sa mga pinaka-importanting function ng rumen. Kasi yung billions of beneficial microorganisms na nandoon or nandito sa rumen itself, sila yung dahilan in the conversion of nutrients that are being absorbed by the body of the animal. So kumbaga nag-ingest ng feed materials yung animal. And eventually, one of the nutrients na nandoon sa material ay carbohydrates. But for the carbohydrates, take note of this, for the carbohydrates to be absorbed in the body of the animal, it should be converted first into VFAs or the volatile fatty acids, which ito yung form ng nutrient na kayang i-absorb ng katawan ng animal. Okay? So take note of this that kumbaga let's just say na yung na-ingest na feed particles or feed materials ng ruminant animals do contain carbohydrates as one of the basic nutrients. Pero hindi kayang ma-absorb ng body ng animal yung carbohydrates itself. Okay? So kailangan muna ng aid or ng help ng mga microorganisms na to, ng mga enzymes na to, for these carbohydrates to be converted into volatile fatty acids. Now, if naging yung carbohydrates ay naging volatile fatty acids na, that is now the time that the body of the animal can now absorb these nutrients for as a major source now of energy. Okay? So yun na yung time na gagamitin nila itong mga volatile fatty acids na to as a source of energy later on. Okay? So those are the different compartments of the stomach of the ruminant animals. Now we move forward to the small and large intestines. So for the small intestines, it comprises mainly of three parts. The duodenum, which is the first segment of the small intestine, which the pancreas is attached Okay? Kung saan ito yung isa sa mga nagpo-produce ng digestive enzymes. Okay? The second segment or the middle segment is the jejunum, which is 90% of the total length of the small intestine. Then the last one is the ileum, which is the last segment. Now, what is the role? What is the role of the small intestine now? So after the partially digested feed, no, after the partially digested feed leaves the stomach, there is this called as the chyme, okay, which is an acid semi-fluid gray pulpy mass, of which in the small intestine, the chyme is mixed with the digestive juices. So what are these? Okay, so we have the pancreatic juices, which are being produced by the pancreas. So these pancreatic juices usually contains yung mga enzymes like trypsin, pancreatic amylase, pancreatic lipase, and maltase, which are beneficial in the conversion of nutrients. Then we have also the bile, which is being produced by the liver, and then the intestinal juices. So tatandaan ninyo na kapag small intestine, as I have said a while back, the digested feed is being absorbed here. So dito yung nutrient absorption. Okay? So these nutrients could end up their journey doon sa mga muscle cells ng animals. But in some cases, these are also deposited in the liver. Okay? So bakit mostly sa muscle cells? Because the animal uses this one to replace those worn out cells and to build new ones. Okay? Para meron na namang gagamitin yung animal later on. So these nutrients are being used, of course, majority as the source of energy ng mga animals. But in other cases, these are being stored in the form of fat for later use. Okay? Kasi ito yung parang nagiging storage ng energy. So kapag walang in-intake na food yung animal, this will be the time na mag-burn out yung fat na na-form para gawing energy ng animal. Okay? So I hope you understand that. However, in the case of large intestine, there are still some feed that are being absorbed. So yung medyo malalaki na feed particles na di kaya ng small intestine, so dito sa large intestine mapupunta. And merong dalawang segment ang large intestine. We have the cecum and then the colon. Then we have the last two parts of the digestive system, which are the rectum and then the anus. So pag rectum, this is the terminal part of the intestines. Then pag anus, this is now the terminal part of the alimentary system. So basic understanding naman na to. I do not need to discuss it furtherly or deeper. Ito kasi these are basic terms lang din naman in the digestive system of animals. So those are the different parts of the digestive system. Now we move to the most important process within the system, which is the process of digestion and rumination. Okay? So we'll try to have the step-by-step processes for you to understand well. So beginning from the mouth, okay? Beginning from the mouth, once the animal ingested the feed, okay, or the feed materials, with the help of its tongue or the accessory glands that I have said a while back, the tongue, the teeth, and then of course the lips or the muscle itself. And once it was being partially chewed with the aid, of course, of the salivary glands, no? Diba? It usually mixes now with the saliva. So dito na magfo-fall yung tatlo kanina na sinasabi ko, yung prehension, mastication, and then the insalivation. Okay? So after the mouth, after na yung nagkaroon na ng bolus formation, okay, that will now the time that it will pass through the pharynx and then the esophagus, okay, which is a muscular tube inside the body of the animal. Then after the esophagus, it will move to the first chamber, which is the rumen, kung saan nandito, as what I have said a while back, nandito yung mga billions of microorganisms to help na ma-partially digest yung kinain ng ruminants. Okay? So yung tawag doon is cud or CUD. Kaya tinatawag natin na chewing of the cud. Okay? Kasi yun yung tawag doon sa partially digested na feed particles, cud. Okay? So the partially digested food now will pass through after the rumen. Okay? So partially na digest na siya from the rumen. Now from the rumen, it will go to the reticulum. Okay, that the second chamber, which is dito din yung tinatawag na collection compartment. Kasi di ba there are instances that the animals can swallow foreign objects or even metallic objects. So saan napupunta yung mga yon? It is dito sa reticulum. Okay? Then after that, after kay reticulum, this will now the time that it will go back to the mouth to be reswallowed, to be regurgitated, and then to be reinsalivated. Okay? So yun yung tinatawag natin na rumination na. So after that, after na ma-reswallow ng animal, I should say na after na ma-rechew, okay? After na ma-rechew, ma-re-ensalivate yung feed particles, that is now the time na mare-reswallow again yung feed particles na nanggaling dito sa mouth. But then after that, it will now be pushed through to the omasum. Okay? Pupunta na siya kaagad kay omasum. Hindi na siya babalik kay rumen at saka kay reticulum. After rechewing it, pupunta na siya kay omasum, wherein it absorbs up now yung mga extra fluid coming from the feed particles. Then after which, this will move on to the last chamber, which is the abomasum, or what we call as the true stomach. So dito mag-act again yung mga enzymes, and this where the complete digestion of the feed particles will occur. Okay, so after which that is the process, or that is the complete process now of the digestion and rumination. But for you to furtherly understand kung paano magkakaroon ng nutrient absorption, kasi ang nangyayari pala naman dito is digestion. Okay, na-digest lang yung mga feed particles na in-ingest ng animals. But then kailangan din ninyong maintindihan kung paano yung nutrient absorption. Okay, so after kay abomasum, so complete na yung digestion process. So after kay abomasum, this will now go through the small intestine, where the absorption of nutrients will eventually come over. Okay, so di ba, as I have said a while back, after the nutrients are being transported to the muscle cells, some of them will go through the liver. So from the stomach and the small intestine, most of the absorbed nutrients will travel also through the portal vein of the liver, which is considered to be the largest gland in the body of the animal. And as I have said kanina, the liver does not play only in nutrient metabolism and storage, but also in the formation of bile, okay, which is a fluid essential for lipid absorption in the small intestine. And kung mapapansin ninyo, the bile that is being produced by the liver ay greenish in color. Okay? Bakit kaya? Bakit kaya green in color? Mainly, nagiging green siya because of the end products of the red blood cell destruction. Kasi mainly the lifespan naman ng mga RBCs na to are just 120 days. Now, after the digested feed particles are being went on to the small intestine, some of which can go through the large intestine. And as I have said kanina, yung cecum, which is under this intestine, yung large intestine, could be a great tool also in the absorption of volatile fatty acids. Saan na ulit nanggaling yung volatile fatty acids? These were converted from the carbohydrates that are being present as nutrient in the feeds of the animals. But in the case of colon, some electrolytes and amounts of water are being absorbed also from here. Okay, so from this point, we'll just wait for the complete excretion of waste products, and this will be expelled out and flowed out into the rectum and anus. Okay, so that is now the complete process of the digestive system. Okay, so I hope from this lecture discussion, you have understand clearly this system, which is an important one in the body of an animal, specifically the ruminants. Okay, so thank you for listening. Have a good day.